Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. When you get to your office and you want to print some material, what do? You're likely to turn on your computer, you hit the print button, and then voila! Out comes a crisp, laser-printed copy of whatever's on your computer screen. Back in 1969, an optical engineer called Gary Starkweather, he thought the same way. And this is what he thought to himself. He woke up one morning and he said, why don't we just print something out directly? And then he goes on to explain how he went to his boss and he told his boss about this idea, and his boss said, that's the most brain-dead idea I have ever heard. He told him to go and find something else to do. And he said, look, lasers are too expensive and computers aren't powerful enough. And Gary thought, that's not right. He's not right. My boss is not right. There's something about this that I really like, this laser printing stuff. And there's got to be something that I can work on. So he got to loggerheads with his boss. And about late 69, early 1970, he was running experiments in the back room behind a black curtain. So Gary's boss threatened to lay off his people if he didn't stop. And so Gary had to make a decision. Should he abandon things or should he go up the ladder with it? A Starkweather kind of decision is the one that we have to make when facing both life and business. How do we know whether we should persist or give up? How do we know if we'll meet with success or failure? And is failure one of the goals that we should be aiming for? Should we really accept failure as a benchmark so that we know that we're moving ahead? In this series, we're going to take a look at 3 areas of perseverance. The first is the link between failure and perseverance. The second is there a way to know when to stop? And the third is why perseverance could do with a coach. Let's start with the first one, which is the link between failure and perseverance. Imagine you were a company that failed repeatedly. You create a tablet device that was at best disappointing. You try your hand at peer-to-peer payment, something like PayPal, and then it fails. You start up an auction site similar to eBay, and that too needs to be shut down. You then get into the phone business and you lose $170 million in a single year. So 10 solid years after you've run your business, your net profit is barely 2.8%. Should you give up? Well, this company chose to soldier on despite the odds. Almost all of us are likely to have used the services of this company at one time or another. Because we're not talking about some unknown, nondescript company. We're talking about Amazon.com, the retailing giant. The reality is that Amazon's profit margin is so thin, and it has continued to be that way for a very long time. Yet, there is something that has come as a result of this perseverance. In early 2016, CEO Jeff Bezos announced that his gamble had paid off. He spoke excitedly about the Amazon Web Services, AWS. And he said that it had reached $10 billion in sales and was now generating 52% of Amazon's total profit for that quarter. What this means is that a single arm of Amazon, not the retail arm, but the cloud hosting section, was the real winner. The perseverance had paid off. In short, what Bezos was mildly gloating about was the fact that if you persevere, it pays off. And while it's easy to look at these cases as big companies with deep pockets, history is full of artists, inventors, musicians, athletes, in fact, all kinds of people in all sorts of professions who never gave up despite the odds. And there's one crucial reason why we should persevere, even when there seems to be no guarantee of success. The reason? What fails right away might work on an unrelated product. And this is the whole point of failure. In April 2015, Lynda.com was sold for $1.5 billion to LinkedIn. When we look at that price tag, we tend to see enormous success. Lynda and her husband, Bruce Heaven, they came incredibly close to the precipice of failure. Lynda.com wasn't the online training giant that it is today. Instead, it was an office training company. And it had week-long workshops. They did very well over the years. They built their business to 35 employees and $3.5 million in revenue. And then came 9/11. And then the dot-com crash. And almost overnight, they had to lay off 75% of their staff. According to a report in Fast Company, they had to downsize their home, they had to give up their classroom leases, which is when they decided to go online. Right now, we're with broadband, and it's easy to run online video courses, Lynda told me when we met for dinner. Back in the early days, it was very hard going. Internet bandwidth was extremely narrow, and it was hard to see how we'd keep the business going. And yet, the perseverance paid off. But what are we learning from this story? Lynda and Bruce weren't looking to have an online training business at that point in time. The only reason they were forced to move into a bigger online space was because of massive and instant failure. That seeming failure in the offline classroom led to the creation and growth of Lynda.com. Lynda and Bruce, they persevered, no doubt, but they took those lessons that they got from the failure and they took it into another domain before the business took off. While these success stories are powerful motivators, perseverance works on unrelated projects when you look at day-to-day life as well. Around 2010, we were having real problems with our membership site at 5000 VC. We'd moved from a hosted membership site to Joomla, which is a content management system. And we had put in some software that would make our life a lot easier. We could create magazines, and, well, it was supposed to be this best thing since sliced bread. The only problem was the software we were using was super klutzy. It would take me about 3 hours to write the articles that I needed to put on the membership site, and over 3 hours to get them posted. I know, it sounds terribly bizarre to all of us who are spoiled by the ease of WordPress, but back then, this software was the option that was presented to me, and I took it. Week after week, I do battle with this frustrating content management system, and there seemed to be no solution on the horizon. In effect, what was supposed to save me time and effort was turning out to be a complete and utter failure. Failure can teach you to move to an unrelated project, and this is the whole point. When you run into problems, you go into something unrelated. And so what I did was I persisted for a while, and I was forced to move to somehow present that information. So I started posting the articles in the forum. So instead of putting it in the content management software, I started posting it in the forum. Now, this helped tremendously because now the clients could ask questions, get clarifications, and do things that they couldn't do before. Instead of a top-down, here's the article series, it became a sort of back and forth. Of course, not everyone likes chatter on the forum. And so then we were running into this problem again. Again, we went to an unrelated space. And so what we did was we started creating reports, and we called them vanishing reports. The vanishing reports were a result of seeming failure after failure. Yet, with persistence, we got the product that to this day is among the top 3 most loved elements of being a member of 5000 BC. So perseverance in the face of failure often leads to unrelated projects. The Post-it that you use today was never supposed to be invented. Arthur Fry, who invented it, he was working on a project of super strong adhesives. Yet, as they met with failure on one front, they discovered an adhesive that could be peeled off easily without damaging the paper, and so the Post-it was born. At first, it seems like the original project is a very good idea, and then it's possible that failure comes along. And failure forces the perseverance, which is why you're more likely to get to a different level, often one that is far superior to the existing level. And this is the core lesson of failure. It's there to teach us a lesson of how to improve our products and services. If we persist, we get to a whole new level. Just like Lynda.com or 3M or 5000 BC. It's doable, you just have to persevere. But wait, there are just as many examples of perseverance leading to ruin. So how do you avoid being blindsided by your project so that you don't end up in this black hole of perseverance? Let's find that out in the next section, the black hole of perseverance. Can we avoid it? When we first moved to New Zealand, I had a job in a web design company. I fancied myself as a web designer because I knew the program Dreamweaver, and I knew it quite well. Plus, I had been studying another hot program at the time. It was called Flash. I was hired by this firm in July and then made redundant by October. There I was, not even a year in New Zealand, and things weren't going so well. To make matters slightly worse, we just bought a house. We had a $180,000 mortgage, which was a lot back in the year 2000. It's at this point that I realized there was no way out of the mess but to go forward. Since I knew barely anyone in New Zealand, I called dozens of ad agencies and just walked in with my cartooning portfolio. In most cases, I returned home empty-handed, until one day an agency gave me an assignment which turned out to be a full-blown ad campaign. So what is the point of this story? The point is that around mid-December, New Zealand tends to shut shop. Almost the entire country goes on a summer vacation, and it seems that no one seems to get back to work until mid-January, maybe even early February. Which means that as a cartoonist, you have no work for all of those months. It's a bit of a forced hibernation period, and you need to get used to it. But I refused to accept it. I refused to accept that I couldn't get work. I tried to call. No one answered. I showed up. No one was around. And so it became this black hole of frustration. Perseverance can have its downsides. You can easily keep at something in the hope that things will get better, and you fail to notice that the rules of engagement have changed. To give up would be madness, yet to stay at the task would be just as bad, if not worse. It's at this point that you have to learn to change your strategy. It wasn't that the agencies weren't hiring cartoonists anymore. They just weren't around to meet anyone. What I was doing with my dogged behavior wasn't perseverance at all. Strategy is when you lie low and you prepare for the moment that is to come. As I kept running into closed doors, I decided to change my strategy. Instead of trying to get work, I decided to cut down on our spending. Both of us decided to cut down on our spending. Instead of going out more often, we kept ourselves tied to a limited budget. And on the work front, I enjoyed the rest period. I spent time doodling, I learned Photoshop, I got a lot better at my skills. Gary Starkweather ran into endless trouble at Xerox PARC when he was designing that laser printer. He knew that he was onto a good thing, but he also knew that the odds were against him. His boss was threatening to fire him, his boss was threatening to fire the entire staff, so he had to change his strategy. He heard that Xerox was opening up a research center in Palo Alto, which was pretty much right across the country from where he lived in New York. But he went up to a superior and threatened. He said, "I'm going to leave for IBM if I don't get a transfer." And so they moved him, and by January of 1971, the first prototype of the laser printer was up and running. In many cases, we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity to move to plan B, yet we continue to be like the fly that keeps hitting itself on the closed window when the next window is wide open. And the reason why we keep digging a deep hole and not getting results is partly because a lack of perseverance is seen as weakness. We need to battle on, we need to soldier on, or we will fail. That's what we think. And yet we've kept going on and on and on and getting more frustrated all the time. So there is this black hole of perseverance, and somehow we have to get out of it. How do we do it? Well, that takes us to our third part, which is we all need a friend, or better still, a coach. So how does a coach help? Why does perseverance need a coach? When you look back at the period between the 14th and the 17th century, you have an incredible flowering of art. But not just art, architecture, politics, science, and literature. Some of the finest work found in museums today are from that period. Two centers stood out in Western art for the enormous number of artists and innovation that we saw in that period. The Renaissance in Italy and the Dutch Republic of the 17th century. So, how did all this astounding work appear all at once? The answer lies in the gradual reform of the political structure, the patronage of that time, but the cities were also the most urbanized cultures of their time. To nail down that magnificence of the Renaissance to one factor, to nail down the magnificence of the Dutch period to one factor would be churlish, and yet there is one element that stood out. It was the factor of guilds and apprenticeship that came into their own. In short, artists had coaches. Granted that the apprentice system was long and arduous, but it meant that there was a constant sense of guidance. The system of coaching is considered to be one of the primary factors why such amazing results were obtained. In Holland alone, it has been estimated that there were about 5 to 10 million works of art during the century of the golden age of Dutch art. And that's not counting the work that poured in from Italy. And yet, it wasn't just the artists working by themselves. They had a coaching system in place. Perseverance is often seen as a solo skill, but it's also the reason why we get so exhausted in our efforts. Take, for instance, the problem that I had with formatting. Now, I have a forum, and all our courses are conducted by the medium of notes, audio, but the live courses have one more component, and that is a forum. This online forum is where clients do their daily assignments, and they're reviewed by me on a regular basis, which is daily. So a small group of 25 clients can generate as many as 1,000 posts a week. No, that's not an exaggeration. It's not unusual for one of our courses to produce between 10,000 and 15,000 posts in just one course, which is 8 to 12 weeks. So here's the problem. The problem is that the posts need formatting. You need, or I need, to make a title look like a title. And yes, the forum software itself has formatting, but what if you wanted to do 3 things at once? So let's say that I wanted to make a title bold, I wanted to make it 18 point, and I wanted to make it maroon. Now, those are 3 steps, and when you assume that I'd be posting at least a third of those posts, you suddenly have, 5,000 posts where I have to put in bold and maroon and 18 point. And that's a lot of work. But I was going through that action. I was continuously going bold, maroon, 18 point, bold, maroon, 18 point. And a coach and an outsider sees things in a different way. So one day I was mumbling about how I was going about this tedious method, and a client told me how I could fix the problem. He said, use Text Expander. Now, that was a software that I already had. I could format the title, the subhead, or any text in a matter of seconds. My perseverance wasn't helping at all. All I needed was a different set of eyes. What seems like talent or ability is a coach catching unforced errors while they're occurring. The coach realizes that you're like the fly in the window. He or she knows that there is another window open. And that's what coaches do. They gently advise you to go one step back, or one step to the left, or one step to the right, and instead of digging yourself into a hole, you've now changed your strategy. When I look at clients in 5000 BC or in the cartooning course, or article writing course, they're working very, very hard, but working hard is not enough. You need someone else. And that is a coach. That is another set of eyes. So this brings us to the end of the 3 parts. What did we cover? Let's find out. When we started out this series on perseverance, we started out with the link between failure and perseverance. And what we found in that link between failure and perseverance was failure took us to an unrelated project. That's what happened with lynda.com. They didn't set out to build lynda.com. They set out to build an offline training service. They got stuck. Things happened to them. Bad things happened to them. And then they moved to a completely different area. The same thing happened with us with 5000 BC. We have the vanishing reports today because of that crappy software. So what perseverance teaches us is that we're going to run into failure, and failure is going to teach us that other lesson. And that other lesson is really cool. So that's the first thing. The second thing that it teaches us is that we can get into a black hole. And if we just keep at it, there's no point. So we have to have a strategy for when things don't work out. a plan B, as it were. If we have that plan B, then you're not like me in the summer break trying to contact all the ad agencies. Plan B really makes a difference. You don't have to keep persevering. It's completely a waste of time. And finally, and this is probably the most important, is to have another set of eyes. When you have a coach can see things way before you can even figure out where you're headed. It helps to have friends. It helps to have other people around you, but a coach really makes a difference. So find yourself a coach, and you will find that your perseverance actually takes you someplace. And that's the end of today's podcast. Let's round up what's happening in psychotactics land, and then we're done with today. So what else is happening in psychotactics land? Well, I've been writing the article, writing notes, and they've been quite a persevering activity because it's quite hard to finish the version 2 of anything. And this has been on the cards for many years. I've worked through it, and I've had a lot of help from Renuka, from Teresa, and from David. And Teresa and David are 5000 BC members. And if you would like to join 5000 BC, you know where to find us. We're at 5000bc.com. On another front, if you have been persevering with your website and you don't know why you're not able to write the About Us page or the home page, then you can go to psychotactics.com/web, and there is a very good book there on website components. You might want to check that out because it's very useful. Most people have found that instead of just persevering endlessly, they can sort it out by just going to psychotactics.com/web. On the music front, by day I've been listening to Bonobo. I was at a cafe one day and I heard this great music and wanted to know who played it. So what I did was I used technology. I stood up and I started to record it on Shazam, which is the app that figures out what kind of music it is. And then the manager of the cafe stepped up and said, okay, I can give you the name. And since then, I've been playing all of these albums of Bonobo, enjoying it by day. But here's another thing. By evening, we've been listening to meditation music, and I was having a bit of trouble sleeping. You're writing all day, and your brain is very wound up. And so we started putting this meditation music on. And it runs through the night, or at least half the night. I'm asleep. I don't know. But my sleep is so much better because of this very soft meditation music playing in the background as we sleep. So there you go. That's all the stuff that's been happening in Psychotactics land. We'll see you in the next podcast. If you haven't already left a review at iTunes, do so. So you know where to find that. That's psychotactics.com/iTunes. Bye for now.